Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies both new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
This week, Paul Blart takes his Segway skills to Las Vegas in Mall Cop 2. Tom Hardy dons a Russian accent for Child 44. Tina Fey tells us about the Monkey Kingdom. And Joss Whedon wants to show us a different perspective in Your Eyes. Our triple feature of older films this week is New Classic 42, Listener's Choice Old Classic The Edge, and Oscar-nominated Auntie Mame. We also look at Paul Blart 2. And I'll take the reins on this one. This is released 6 years after the original Paul Blart film, and it takes place 6 years later as well. In it, Kevin James's mall cop loses his mother, and after a 6-day marriage, his wife as well, and is left with just his daughter, played painfully by Rainey Rodriguez, though she just got accepted to UCLA completely across the country. The two take a trip to Vegas for a security guard convention, during which Paul also hopes to find bonding time. Instead, they uncover a plot to steal expensive pieces of art from the Wynn Hotel, and Neil McDonough co-stars as Vincent, the lead villain. This movie is painfully unfunny. Some lines might have been so bad they're good, but it's not even that I was laughing at how bad the lines or situations were, it's that I was laughing that anybody even thought anything about this movie was a good idea. Kevin James and Nick Bakay wrote the script like they did in the first film, and not only is this one horribly unfunny, but there are so many things that don't even make sense. Not the least of which is that the entire film is basically one fat joke after the last, yet at one point we're expected to believe James can fit in a normal-sized suitcase with room to spare. The whole movie is filled with these weird and unnecessary inconsistencies like that. It is the worst movie of the year. It's an F. Joe?
Well, I never saw the first film, but I heard that some people liked it.
It's not nearly this bad. The first film's like a C+, maybe a C.
I had the general impression it looked stupid, so I never saw it. Didn't really interest me, but I've heard mixed things. But if this is any indication of it, I never would want to watch the first one. The thing about it was, I had no expectations because of universal hatred, so I thought maybe it might be okay. But it's just so mean-spirited. That's what I didn't like about it. I thought that everything about the character, he was either mean to other people or people were mean to him. It was just mean. It wasn't funny. And there was a lot of offensive stuff there. And the plot itself was just incredibly generic to me. Like, I just felt like I was watching a really boiled-down version of something I've already seen. And just everything was so awkward, and most of the actors seemed like they just were spacing out half the time. Really, very few of them were actually seeming like they were delivering their lines well at all. I mean, I thought Kevin James was trying to bring some energy to it.
Yeah.
I thought I kind of almost liked the character. Wanted to feel bad for his plight with his daughter. Like, okay, it's not bad on the central idea, but I don't know. It just everything about it was stale. Everything about it was stale and pretty much lifeless and just so mean-spirited. I couldn't get behind it. I just thought it was really a waste of time, and I'm gonna give it an F.
I think the best metaphor for this film is that the one character keeps falling asleep during it. Justin, what about you for Paul Blart, Mall Cop 2?
I envy that, man. I guess my big question that has always been on my mind ever since we saw the advertising for this movie was, did anyone really want this movie? I know it's been 6 years. I know people who like the first one. I don't always come to them for great movie advice. But honestly, I don't know anyone who is excited at the prospect of a Paul Blart 2. And I feel like this movie continues to show that no one wanted this movie. The first one, just going off of what I saw while working at the time, I felt like it was meant to show this kind of action slapstick kind of motif.
That's fair.
But the sequel takes at least half, if not even more so, to get to that point. And when we do get there, it's just so late in the game that we don't have any sort of fun. And you're absolutely right, Joe. It's incredibly mean-spirited. I thought it was absolutely hateful towards women to the point that I'm surprised feminist groups aren't up in arms.
And there was some racist stuff, too.
Oh my gosh.
There was a gay stereotype.
Yeah, it's really bad in that regard.
And like you said, Dan, all the fat jokes just everywhere. It was just like...
Oh, yeah.
I was just like...
Constant fat jokes.
I mean, it was, I don't know. It was a little uncomfortable.
The tagline may be, always bet on Blart, not a chance. F.
The corny lines, by the way, when he is, like, going for, a kill shot or whatever, it's like, when he tells the guy, always bet on Blart, He's about to stab somebody with a fork. Oh, we've hit a fork in the road. Come on.
You can do better than that.
It's pretty weird.
No, I don't think that he can.
Well, the fork thing's like one of the worst jokes, too, because
I
he
know.
has a fork to keep him from eating. It's a vibrating fork, and it
Yes.
lights up to tell him to slow down.
Because he's fat, Joe.
Really?
By the way, he definitely put on weight for this role.
Yeah.
If your method acting is putting on weight for the Paul Blart character,
Find better projects.
yeah, you got to do something about your filmography. Because he looked really heavy, which obviously goes with the script that he himself wrote. What was the racist part?
Oh, there was just some offensive stuff regarding. I think there was some Mexican guy or something. Some minor.
I mean, I just thought it was stupid. I wasn't offended by it. I was offended that they made it.
No, there was some light
and
stuff
released
there.
it to people, but
and it was just kind of the portrayal of some of the characters, like the security guards were overrated as well.
Oh,
Just
okay.
like, it's just everybody was some kind of really generic caricature that was just so unlikable.
Well, that's because these guys don't know how to write a movie.
And it's a pity, because Kevin James used to be really, really funny, and I just don't know what happened to him.
Never in the movies, though. And I've always said this. I really enjoyed King of Queens.
I love that
His
show.
stand-up is okay. He has never made a movie that I liked. People like Hitch. I don't like Hitch.
I thought he was funny.
That's people seem to point to that one as the example. But I mean,
It was
you
still
look
10
at
years ago.
it was still even more than that. Probably 13 years ago now.
Oh my God.
But I mean, you have the Dilemma, the Grown Ups movies, the Here Comes the Boom.
Well, also notice that a lot of those are Happy Madison collaborations, too.
They are, and Adam Sandler, was a producer of this as well. Which, look, that's fine. If you want to have your friends make some movies, that's fine. But I agree. Who was clamoring for this movie?
Kevin James.
6 years after the fact. Yeah, well, Kevin James, wanted to make some money, I'm sure, and he and Sandler are making it because it couldn't have cost that much to produce. And I'm sure Steve Wynn gave them the hotel for promotion because you see the Wynn Hotel name more than you see Paul Blart's daughter in this movie.
I've actually heard that.
It's sad yet unfortunately true.
So I mean, I'm sure that was pro bono.
That might speak to it too, because I've actually heard that this movie basically was just an infomercial for the hotel more than anything else, with this very loose plot around it.
Yes, well, and it was the first ever movie filmed at this particular hotel. We see a lot of Vegas movies.
Yeah.
None have been filmed here, apparently. And this is also the first movie ever to get this new tax credit or something for Nevada.
I heard about that
So
too.
obviously it's bringing,
business.
And listen, I was in Vegas 2 months ago, and the first shot of the movie when he goes out there is, the whole strip. And I was like, oh, that's where I stayed. So it was exciting for me. That was the most exciting part of the movie.
Wow.
Is, hey, I stayed there 2 months ago. But, so obviously it probably wasn't made for much money. It made $24 million opening weekend. Who is seeing this movie, Justin? I guess families, because it's the only PG option if you've already seen Home and Cinderella.
More or less.
And if you don't like Monkey Kingdom. Or, Sandler fans, I guess. I don't know.
At least no prospect of Paul Blart 3, I guess.
I don't know.
Depends on how much this makes, I guess, to be honest. I mean,
you think that if they got such universal hatred, they'd take a hint. Literally,
you would think that.
This isn't a side thing, but I know some people, I guess, make fun of the whole security card motif. I never really quite got behind that. I always thought it was mean, to be perfectly honest, because you see those people all the time, and it seems like nobody takes them seriously anyway.
Right.
So you got a movie, I don't know if it's really supposed to be glorifying them in some way, making fun of it. I think it kind of adds to the stereotype. And you have a movie that is kind of giving him even worse reputation.
And two at the time, because Observer and Report came out the same year as the original Paul Blart.
Exactly, which is also giving them another dark perspective.
Right.
In a different way, but yes, I just...
Different fat actor.
I know, exactly. Well, yes, I'm just saying, I know that it's easy to probably look at those sort of careers and say, okay, well, it's easy to make fun of them, but, I mean, security can be dangerous.
Yeah.
I mean, they do go through training. I don't know. I just feel like it's a cheap shot. I think
it is.
I feel like the whole franchise, I guess it is now, is just one big cheap shot.
I would agree with that. All right, well, let's move on to Child 44. Joe, tell us about that.
Child 44 is an American-British mystery thriller directed by Daniel Espinosa, written by Richard Price, and based on Tom Rob Smith's novel Child 44, which was written in '08. The film stars Tom Hardy, Gary Oldman, Noomi Rapace, Joel Kinnaman from RoboCop yet again, Paddy Considine, Jason Clarke, very briefly, and Vincent Cassell. During Stalin's rule of the Soviet Union in the early 1950s, disgraced factory work in the Far East affected society on the individual. He was really responsible for that, especially during the Stalinist regime, which I think it was a very interesting concept. Murder was considered a capitalist problem, so we can't even acknowledge real murder. And you also have this individual who's trying to deal with his own issues from his brutal childhood and carrying that over into parallels with the serial killer and his motivations. But you also have the whole issue with his wife being a spy and that relating to their relationship. There's a lot of ideas here, and some of them are kind of well executed, but nothing feels quite wholly formed. It's a little bit clunky and a little bit older sold. Unfortunately, though, I can't really say that that's necessarily making this movie the best film ever, of course, but there's definitely potential for something great here. And I think that's definitely held up by Hardy's performance, as well as the face. I think they do have some good chemistry. I think he did add a lot to this character. Most of the supporting cast does a good job. I also thought that it was gritty and dark, and it fit with the themes of the story that these big ideas it's trying to tackle. And it was pretty well edited, and I can't say that I was bored watching it. I just feel like it could have been fleshed out and a little more focused. So I'm going to leave this one with a B-.
Well, I felt like if not for a great performance by Hardy, another good one from Oldman, good one from Rapace, Child 44 would be pretty tedious to get through. This thing plods along for 2 hours and 17 minutes. It's only really memorable in fits and starts. There seems to be a good story somewhere in here, but you're right, Joe. It's sort of all over the place and unfocused. Hardy is trying his best to give us something with this character, but the whole movie ends up becoming a chore. In one scene, Hardy is sitting in a car with Oldman, fresh off his trip to gain some information in Moscow, and he says something like, well, Moscow was a bust. Glad we spent 15 minutes there then.
And Oldman responds like, well, it's okay because I figured it out over here while you were gone.
Right, exactly. Like, all right, good. Why was that whole sequence in the movie then? So, it just didn't progress anything, and that's sort of what I felt about this movie as a whole. It's a C for me. Justin?
There are two major crimes I feel like are committed to this movie. It didn't have a better director, and it didn't have a more ruthless editor. There's something really compelling in Child 44 that I think could have been amazing, but ultimately it just gets bogged down by a script trying to do and be everything. Spy conspiracies, a murder mystery, they're all really, really compelling storylines. They just don't go anywhere, and when they're supposed to be really emotional, we don't feel it. And because the movie's 2 hours and 17 minutes, everything feels underplayed. But honestly, Hardy's doing everything he can to try and keep this movie afloat. He's fighting on a sinking ship, unfortunately. But nothing could have been done to salvage the film's ridiculously over-the-top third act. It's just a mishmash of a movie that should have been so much better. I'm so glad I didn't put it on my most anticipated for the year. I leave it with a D+.
This was considered for your most anticipated.
Tom Hardy and Noomi Rapace. I can't really say that the logic wasn't unjustified. And a gritty murder mysteries, no less.
I guess.
I was intrigued.
I didn't think it was that bad.
Yeah, you could be intrigued, but... So, Joe, you seem to kind of like this.
It's alright.
Yeah, it didn't bore you at all.
Can't say it all.
Okay, a little bit.
Okay, like I love it when films try to tackle a part of history that nobody talks about. And I thought it was interesting because apparently Russia banned this movie because apparently it made the Russian people look so bad that they didn't even allow it to be aired.
Wow.
And the critic that screened it there compared it. He said that it made the Russian people look like they were as evil as those that dwell in Mordor, which showed that he's a Lord of the Rings fan, which I thought was kind of interesting. So, I mean, and I was wondering where that was, and I feel like, yes, the idea of Stalin starving these people and leaving all these orphans and it having an effect on two different men on different sides of the law and, what makes one type of killing good while the other one not so good. Like I said, I love compelling philosophical questions like that about moral human dilemmas. And I mean, in communist Russia, we don't see too much of that. Plus, I love a good serial killer murder mystery, and I thought Tom Hardy's character was good. I just agree with you guys, though, that had a couple storylines there, and nothing was quite fleshed out enough. But I like the atmosphere, and I thought that the acting was really good. So it was enough to hold it together for me to kind of be compelling.
Okay.
But it definitely has flaws. I mean, I can see why you guys might not have been big fans.
Yeah. I thought Hardy was clearly the reason this movie worked at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Oldman was good, but they didn't really give his character a lot to do.
Sadly, no.
Well, he shows
You
up
know.
2/3 into the movie, so I can't really blame them.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. That's probably part of it. But even still, he could have had a little more focus, I suppose. You know.
As the movie as a whole. In that
Yeah,
but
you're right. You're right. I do think the mystery element was interesting. You know, who is this guy and why is he doing this and everything. And my favorite part was really the kind of turmoil of the Hardy character, because obviously at the beginning of the movie he's, you know, company man here and telling people false information that he knows is false. It's an arc-ish, yeah, because really he knew it was the wrong thing to do in the beginning, and he was already grappling with those demons. So I can't call it a full arc.
Well, I don't know. I think that he was kind of going with it like a lot of people would,
Mm-hmm.
because I think one of the big issues in the turn for that arc is actually when he learns something about his wife, which that was a very good scene. I thought it was a bit of a good twist, and you could see that has a profound effect on him. So, I don't know. I think that his character does kind of go through an arc, but it's almost like he was half there to begin with.
Right.
So, I don't know.
I think, as we keep hitting on the same point, it's also a matter of if they had just kept focusing on one sort of consistent storyline, we probably would have gotten more of that. It's just because it's trying to do all these other things that get in the way at every time, we can't really get the full brunt of that.
Well, I mean, the biggest problem is there's definitely things the movie's about, but I'm not entirely sure what it's wholly about, because the character of Tom Hardy obviously has issues with the government and what he's doing, so he kind of gives it all up, essentially. But then he follows these murders, but to prove what? Because of what happened to him when he was a kid and seeing all the kid murders and maybe something he did when he was younger, you know, in relation to that, and then stopping this man is so compelling even after this point. You're not really working for anyone. Is it for your brother because he's there? It's a little bit murky.
Right.
Like you can kind of see where it's going, but I can't give you a definite answer.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Like I like the general idea of things.
All right, well, up next is Monkey Kingdom, and that is this year's Disney nature documentary for Earth Day. It's narrated by Tina Fey and shows us a community of monkeys from a jungle in Sri Lanka. It follows Maya, a macaque, who is low on the social totem pole, and her newborn son Kip, as they struggle to survive among an interesting class system not very different from our own. Last year's Disney doc Bears struggled in part because of its corny jokes and more lackluster storyline. Tina Fey delivers a great narration that is funny, compelling, and very informative. I did not know the monkeys could swim, or a lot of the things revealed here. It also helps that, unlike bears, we do see other animals here than just monkeys, including elephants, a mongoose. I still feel that with such a short runtime, it still drags a bit. I sort of reached my point in a nature doc about an hour in, so any longer than that, I do struggle a little bit. And that was a problem I had in that film as well. But it is shot incredibly well, and it's just fascinating. I give it a B+. Justin?
Dan, you hit it pretty much right on the head. Unlike last year's Bears, Monkey Kingdom actually finds a really decent balance between being a documentary and being a cutesy Disney animal film. Faye, I couldn't agree more, has a lot of fun narrating. I thought she had this really smart balance between good info for kids and adults alike, but also having a couple of decent one-liners and clever jokes here and there.
Yeah.
Which was, for the most part, pretty tasteful. But I thought what was really good about this was it was such a welcome addition, adding in all these deeper themes about class, about conflict, and not skirting around it. Cough, cough, McFarland. I thought it was a really big improvement for Disney Nature. I think the cinematography, you're absolutely right, was spot on. Not perfect, but for an 80-minute nature documentary you can take the kids to, I'll take it. I give it a B.
I give this and McFarlane the same grade, by the way. Joe?
I like McFarlane.
Yeah, me too.
I will admit, it took me a second to remember what you were talking about.
Kevin Costner running movie.
I thought Seth MacFarlane. I'm like,
speaks volumes about your B+.
He thought Seth MacFarlane.
Monkey Kingdom, you guys pretty much said it best. I think Tina Fey does a great job narrating here. I think that the film is very informative, and I think that it actually does have a good narrative, which is definitely a massive improvement over Bears. And I think the mixture of having other animals is good. Definitely touches on a lot of things I didn't know, so I thought it was educational, but enjoyable for the kids, and I think relatively interesting. I do agree that it might drag a little bit toward the end, but I thought it was pretty excusable. Really, I didn't have any problems with the movie. I thought it was very enjoyable overall. I actually leave with an A-.
Very nice. Yeah, I think Faye really does this great delivery. And Justin, I think you said it, the word is balance. She has this great balance that John C. Reilly last year in Bears was trying too hard to be like hokey and corny, I feel like. And it wasn't even that informative, really.
I felt like they just gave him like random footage and said work with it.
yeah, maybe they did do some improv about what's happening.
I mean, the clam scene was great, but that was about it.
That's really the most memorable line of the whole movie.
Well, it wasn't really that informative in regards. I don't remember anything really learning too much about the bear specifically.
Yeah, here we learn a lot, and the way it's written, you know, when they go underwater, you know, and Tina Fey actually asks the audience, "Did you know monkeys could swim?" I turned to Joe and I said, "No, I did not know that."
Neither did I.
And I think that helps it be a little more, maybe not interactive, but
engaging.
Yeah, engaging. It's like she really is talking to you, you know, at a museum or something, or a zoo, you know, where you're looking at these animals. And I didn't think it was just jokey enough.
Yeah.
I thought Bears was too much with it. The songs are used very well here.
Monkeys.
Yeah,
The
I thought
monkeys
the monkeys
theme,
one was a little tacked on, but
a little on the nose
But
for you.
it's kind of obligatory, though, in all honesty.
And listen, kids don't know what that is.
That's right.
You know,
In the 60s.
so something for the parents to enjoy. But it was, speaking of the kids, though, it was very dark. They murdered 2 animals in this movie.
I was gonna say there's a body count.
Yeah, there is a slight body count, and for a G-rated documentary, it's a little much.
I'd argue, though, you know, sometimes with the kids, you got to show them what's what. It is nature, and you can be a little dark as long as there's a happy ending. That's Don Bluth's method, right?
That's right.
After all,
Well, you also note that both deaths are for the most part off screen, and you only see, I think, one body.
yeah, but you definitely get the point.
You
though.
get the gist,
You do.
for sure.
I don't think a kid would really miss that.
No.
But I would argue that makes the narrative more compelling, though, if there's a little more at risk, and you really feel that in regards to the main character. And that's really more important. You feel for her and her struggle.
All right, well, that is Monkey Kingdom. Let's move on to our home media moment, and this is In Your Eyes. Justin?
This one stars Zoe Kazan and Michael Stahl David as Rebecca and Dylan, 2 individuals from very different lives who discover they share a mysterious telepathic connection. They become able to see, hear, and feel what the other is experiencing, which draws concern of their peers when the 2 get romantically closer. This is a very, very strange concept, but I feel like after Her, where a guy has a relationship with his Siri-like device, hey, I'll believe anything if you can make it work. Fortunately, writer and executive producer Joss Whedon plays to the strangeness of this concept, and for the most part I would argue has fun with it, largely thanks to the chemistry of both Kazan and Stahl David, adding a little bit of humor, a decent connection, no pun intended, and keeping the sci-fi element relatively interesting. I never got bored with it. My only real issue with it kind of comes from the 3rd act, where it gets a little all over the place trying to add in this thriller component, but fortunately it comes back to being a mostly strange yet sweet love story. I think with a B+.
Joe, what do you think of In Your Eyes?
Well, I agree. I think the concept is fairly unique here, and I actually liked some of the editing techniques where they show what they were both experiencing. I thought that was pretty cool, with some good shots there. And I thought that they had some great chemistry as well, Justin. I have to absolutely agree with you. I think it's definitely one of the big components to make this film successful. But really, I think it goes back to Joss Whedon. He just has this great interplay with dialogue, and it kind of reminded me of some of his best work with Buffy and Firefly. You really feel like the characters are real, and they're very snarky and funny, and I think that humor is definitely the best part of it. I do agree it kind of has some tonal issues towards the end with the thriller element, but on the whole, I actually really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was fun. Pretty much what I expected from Whedon. I give it a B+ as well.
Well, I will give Whedon that I like that he's branching out a little bit with this movie. He's never done anything really like this. He's dabbled in sci-fi, obviously. He's dabbled in, you know, romance a little bit. But I did not find the humor in this movie. I thought for a Whedon project, where is the wit? Where is the clever writing? I like the concept, but I didn't think that the writing is as sharp as we've seen him do in Buffy and Angel and some other things. It's definitely an interesting idea. I think it fits in pretty well with this new subgenre of weird romance conceits. Justin mentioned Her. Ruby Sparks is another one, speaking of Zoe Kazan.
Surely.
But I just thought this turned out to be so melodramatic and a bit more bland than I was expecting from the concept. I think it's got some moments. The acting is good. I do think they have good chemistry with each other. And I do agree that the editing and stuff of who's seeing what was interesting, but I think it actually works a little bit better as an idea than it did in the execution here. It's a B- for me.
Well, it's definitely not as snarky and witty as Whedon's been in the past, but I think because he was branching out with a different kind of story, I was okay with that. I could still tell it was him, though.
Yeah,
I don't think I ever would have known.
I
mean,
could tell.
I could see where some of the wit was coming from, having seen Firefly and
It was-
one episode of Buffy I've watched. But
It was more of a characterization thing, like the interplay between the two of them.
Mhm.
I thought that reminded me of some of more of the romantic elements in Buffy.
Okay.
That's where I was looking at it from, and admittedly, that was knowing he did it going in.
Right.
So maybe you're right. Maybe I wouldn't have been able to tell. So I'm saying it's definitely not his A game, obviously.
Correct.
But I thought it worked for the most part. I thought it was pretty good overall. I enjoyed it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I didn't know going in, I don't think I ever could have picked up on it. I will agree, I guess, that the interplay between the two is a little bit more maybe rapid fire than another director would have made it.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a Whedon stamp. I'll give you that. But a lot of people do sort of have that rapid fire delivery stamp. So
I mean, there weren't too many like random comic book references.
Oh, no.
It's like, I mean,
No.
it's not the most Whedon-esque thing ever.
you're right on that. But I guess I've never seen his really sci-fi stuff. I mean, I know him most from the Buffyverse.
Well, this is like sort of in between, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's as sci-fi as her is.
It's
really.
a light sci-fi.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on here to our new classic. It's going to start our triple feature of older films, and this is 42. It's a 2013 sports biopic starring Chadwick Boseman as number 42, Jackie Robinson, the player that broke baseball's color barrier in the 40s. It follows the young Robinson from the Kansas City Monarchs, Montreal Royals, and then eventually in his famous team, the Brooklyn Dodgers. It is all about his struggles with racism, among other things. Harrison Ford co-stars as Dodgers exec Branch Rickey, and Alan Tudyk gives one of the most memorable performances of the film as an incredibly racist Phillies manager. 2013 seemed to be the year of the race relations movie. The Butler, Fruitvale Station, eventual Best Picture winner 12 Years a Slave, and honestly, 42 ranks right up there with him. The story it tells is more subtle than 12 Years for sure, but in some respects almost as important to our culture. Baseball is the all-American game, and to see the struggle that black athletes had to be a part of it is heartbreaking. Boseman gives a standout performance, and Ford is definitely on his A game here as well. Like The Butler in 12 Years, 42 runs on a little too long, but it does tell a great story about an American hero, and it's an A- for me. Joe?
Well, Dan, I have to echo your sentiment. I think that was a perfect encapsulation of that particular film.
Well, thank you.
I actually agree with you. I think it's an incredibly important story, and I think that the actors do a really good job of portraying all their characters without making it seem too sappy. I think that the film does border on corniness sometimes, and does get a little overly sentimental, I think, at brief moments, but overall, though, I think it's hard to deny the power of the story, and for the most part, it flows really tightly, and it's very coherent. It's almost a flawless film, really, besides those minor points. I actually leave it with an A.
Good. Justin?
it's brave to tackle a biopic about such a huge character as Jackie Robinson, but fortunately, Chadwick Boseman met the challenge perfectly. The first 20 to 30 minutes of the film I thought were a little bit shaky, being all over the place trying to cover a lot of details, but ends up paving the way for some great drama, gorgeous cinematography, and some beautifully done interplay with both Boseman and Harrison Ford. I think if it was any other year, both of them would have been up for Academy Awards. Fantastic performances, and honestly, if it wasn't for those 20 to 30 minutes, it probably would have gotten an A or an A plus for me. I bump it up happily from a B plus to an A minus.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on that. I can't believe you gave that a B plus originally. And the performance is groundbreaking. In a different year, maybe he would have been. That was a big year for actors. Obviously, Fruitvale, Michael B. Jordan could have been up as well, for his performance there. But
easily. But
the Academy does love their bigger-than-life characters. They're based on, these real people. And obviously, should we tell Edgio for 12 Years a Slave, hit the money there. But, yeah, I mean, Jackie Robinson is this just grand person. Not unlike James Brown, which Boseman played, last year, in a much worse film than this.
So
You
disappointing.
know, he still gave a pretty good performance, though.
Oh yeah,
you know,
he deserved far better than we gave him.
It certainly wasn't anything that he did wrong. But yeah, there's a lot of really, really good performances here, and Harrison Ford really surprised me.
I did not see that coming. I mean, obviously, no one's ever going to talk smack about Indiana Jones or Han Solo.
Yeah,
but I mean, this was just.
but in recent years,
years, this was flat out in a league all its own.
yeah, it really was. I mean, it was a huge career resurgence of a performance, and we saw that because now he's been in a few movies since. He did Ender's Game. Obviously, they had to bring him back for Star Wars. He would have been in that either way. But you know, but he's really in more stuff than we've seen him in a decade almost.
Firewall.
Yeah, the last thing he was in that Morning Glory movie where he's the news anchor.
Oh,
I mean, that's like the last thing I remember him in before this.
You're right.
You know,
yeah,
it had been a while, so it was really and unrecognizable in the preview. By the way, it was just sort of a shot of him in the stands with like his glasses and chomping on a cigar, maybe. But it looked like him, but it didn't really sound like him to me. So once I saw the movie, I was like, oh, that really is Harrison Ford. This is a transformative character.
He's the reason it's not an A+.
Is that right? Oh, so you did not care for his performance?
No, it was a good performance, but the hokiness came from some of his delivery a little bit. First black man in baseball.
Yeah, but that was a sign of the times. I mean,
I'm sorry, I couldn't get it.
Are you going to grill J. Jonah Jameson while we're at it?
Well, he's a fictional character.
Yeah, that's a little more of a hokey role, though.
I mean, I think it was a good performance, but...
All right, I'll do you one better. William H. Macy and Seabiscuit.
I hate Seabiscuit.
But William H. Macy did a great job.
He may have. I don't remember. It's been like 10 years. I never wanted to see that movie.
He's not into
It's a boring movie. Hate Seabiscuit.
Say other movies without Tobey Maguire, though, and see where we go.
Oh, sorry. I was trying to think of hokey period pieces.
That's all right.
Yes, that's right. Anything related with Tobey Maguire.
Yeah, was Harrison Ford in Pleasantville by chance?
No, I understand he was just trying to emanate the way they spoke the town. I thought some of the sentimentality.
I can see where you're going.
I thought it was just a little corny. I don't know if that was necessarily his fault. It was the direction. Like I said, when movies get a little over sentimental and they try to Oscar bait, that always annoys me. And he was part of that. Good performance, but it's no Han Solo. It's no Indiana Jones. It's not even a Decker. Okay, so it's like it's still not the best Harrison Ford. Okay, now, I'll tell you something bold. Okay,
tell me.
Get Off My Plane. Still better performance.
Is that
Whoa.
right?
That is a very
wow.
Joe.
Okay.
I mean,
I'm not sure if I can get behind that.
I don't know, man. I'm sorry.
I can agree that it's a little bit on. I don't know if it's Oscar baiting necessarily, but it's definitely a little more on the corny end.
And I don't know if that's necessary.
Okay. Back up a sec. Branch Rickey's performance, acting as a sign of the times, considered by Joe standards hokey. Harrison Ford as action hero president, Air Force One, is considered better for being hokey. I'm failing to see the logic here, Joe.
Because he was running with what the movie provided. I think if he was trying to go for something a little more dramatic, he would
Branch wasn't
a little less hokey.
I think what he's saying is the difference maybe is that Air Force One was a hokey movie in general. 42 is not at its core. There are very strong performances here by many people that we've mentioned. Right, Joe?
Tudyk especially.
Tudyk especially. God, is he good in this movie.
Branching out dramatically from things I've seen him in.
Right.
Harrison Ford having a hard time separating the badass president here. I can see it. I can hear it in the voice a little bit. And that's what was distracting me. Maybe that's my attachment to him in other roles. I think he does a good job. It is a good role. But the delivery's a little corny for me.
It definitely did not affect me one way or the other.
Not significantly.
But I absolutely I see what you're saying.
I still think it's a very good performance. I'm not bashing.
I thought it was a great performance.
I still gave the movie an A. And if it really bothered me, it would be a lot lower.
Right.
I'm just saying. I was going to keep my mouth shut, but you just had to ask.
I wanted to hear.
Well, you guys told us it's the best resurgence. I agree. It's probably the best performance he's done in 10 years. But I don't think it's his best ever.
Okay. Well, up next, Joe, this is your listener's choice pick here. Not yours, but you're going to lead The Edge.
Yes. Yeah, this was my dad's, actually. We had this in the queue for about a year almost.
Yeah, Netflix did not want to give it up.
I guess not. The Edge is a 1997 American survival drama directed by Lee Tamahori and written by David Mamet, who is Justin's favorite, right? Favorite? A billionaire, played by Anthony Hopkins, and two other men, Alec Baldwin and Harold Perrineau, aka Lost, are stranded, unequipped, by a plane crash in the dangerous Alaskan wilderness, not the Pacific. The three men must contend with the elements, a vicious grizzly bear, not polar bear, and each other, in their desperate struggle to get back to civilization. And also, Alec Baldwin wants to kill Anthony Hopkins because he wants to live with his wife, but, you'll figure that out in about the first 5 minutes. This movie definitely isn't subtle in regards to setting up what the primary conflict is going to be, and there definitely is an element of corniness, and man, I do have to say, the worst part of the movie is definitely the CGI birds. Like, really, that was really bad.
Forgot about that.
But once they get down into the wilderness, there is some definitely great shots of the landscapes. I think Hopkins and Baldwin do a good job playing off each other. They both give good performances. But for the most part, it's pretty by the numbers in terms of the suspense. The high points are definitely with the grizzly bear and the attacks. They survive that. Maybe it runs on a little bit too long, but I think for the most part it's pretty sufficient in what it does. I'll leave it the Edge with a B. And in regards to why my dad picked it, I remember that it was one of those movies that we used to watch sometimes and kind of joke about it. A lot of the movies that my dad seems to like are kind of indicative of something about his life. Like, he loves the outdoors. He loves making fun of the rich people with their fancy doohickeys and talking about how superior they are. So I think it was something comical for him, and it's got a lot of memorable lines. We used to quote a lot of movies from The Edge and various other ones. So it's kind of one of those things, movies we just would watch to kind of enjoy ironically, I suppose.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's a guilty pleasure thing. It's hard to tell with my dad sometimes whether or not he really loves them or whether or not it's more of a humorous thing. Sometimes I think it's a combination of both.
All right, Justin, how about for you?
Well, I like to believe that part of a thriller involves providing the audience with characters that we can at least moderately get behind, so when the tension starts building, we genuinely care about what happens to them. The Edge, that is not the case. The script from David Mamet may have been this sort of dark comedy about these pompous rich guys reverting to their primal nature. Could have been interesting, but neither Hopkins or Baldwin, in a Justin shocker, I know, seem to even be remotely up to the task, which is a major shocker for Anthony Hopkins. But in the end, I honestly feel like it's easier to root for the bear, who gives a far more compelling performance than either of them in this movie, and the fact that it goes on easily, if not even more so, 20 minutes longer than it ever needed to. I feel like there's still something there. I can see hints of where Mamet's writings could have led to something better, but this just is a complete garbled mess. I leave with a D+.
Well, I disagree, Justin. I do think that Baldwin and Hopkins did do fine.
Well, this is the Baldwin hater over here, so we never would have expected
I know you
anything
don't like
more.
Baldwin, but I mean, in all honesty, I will agree. I don't think it's either one of their best, but I think they're giving a pretty standard performance for either of them, personally. But that's just me.
Well, I feel like maybe the material just did not lend itself to good acting. Like you said, it is kind of a guilty pleasure type of movie.
Yeah, kind of.
For the most part. It's definitely tense at certain times, but I do think the acting is a bit over the top, but kind of in a fun way.
Yeah.
I think they know that this is a little bit corny
Cheesy, yeah.
And cheesy, but honestly, the biggest crime of this movie is that it should end about 50 minutes in.
50.
The entire last half of the movie is just pointless and tedious. I also found that there's no real reason that this is rated R. All of the foul language is completely gratuitous. They just seem to be throwing them in
For the sake of
throwing them in, and there really aren't many like gory, violent shots. Like, I think they were going for a grittier tone than I think they needed to, I guess. So, I don't know. The Edge, for me, is kind of just an all-around missed opportunity. And as I say, never get on a plane with Harold Perrineau. Because between this and Lost, you're going to crash.
Bad luck.
It's a C- for me.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see how, in a guilty pleasure way, it would be enjoyable. I don't think the performances are terrible, Justin, but I do think that they are...
A little lacking.
Well, they're corny because that's what the movie is providing for it.
It's a pretty corny movie.
You know, I can't say that. Yeah, Hopkins is definitely not up to his Hannibal best here, but I don't think that it's that much of a fault of either man. I just feel like they were sort of having fun with the roles, I guess. And maybe that didn't work for you?
I don't know. With Hopkins, you gotta expect more, because the guy has proven it time and time again. He's an incredibly talented actor. And he should have been able to do something with this, particularly when they're talking about the whole psychological component and exploring the subplot that's incredibly obvious the entire time, which I can't even believe they were trying to mystify for their audiences. Baldwin, I go with no expectation.
Well, I will say, based upon all the movies I've seen with both actors, this is a pretty standard Hopkins performance.
I don't agree.
It really is.
It isn't.
I just feel like, though, it is the script. I don't think he's necessarily giving a bad performance. I just don't think that this is a very serious movie, and I don't think that they're really taking it that seriously. So I don't think that Hopkins is like phoning it in or anything. I just think I think he sees what this movie is and sort of attacked it that way.
That's how I view it. I mean, it's really not a bad performance from him. I've seen worse Hopkins performances. At least he's trying to provide some energy because it's a fun movie.
Yeah, that's kind of how I took it.
So, I mean, trust me, Justin, it's not the worst. I think it's pretty standard based on what I've seen. I think Alec Baldwin is fine. I think he's about as fine as he normally is.
Yeah, but normally for Baldwin is horrible to Justin. So I know. You know what I mean? So that makes sense.
From my perspective, this is what I expect from Baldwin.
Right.
I think he's playing the kind of jerky, guy. So I think it's fine,
Well, I would say that's probably what you expected from it, right?
Right. Pretty standard performance from him.
A standard performance, which you and Baldwin is not good.
Emotions.
Yeah.
Well, by your standards, yeah, but I think he's just doing what he does.
Basically, 90s Baldwin to me was like contemporary Nicolas Cage.
But I guess that's my point. It's not necessarily a quote-unquote bad Baldwin performance if they're all bad to you. It's more of a standard Baldwin performance.
Which I think it is. A standard Baldwin
Right.
performance. Which I think
but
is
you
fine.
like him, and you do not, Justin, so...
It's fine.
Yeah.
I agree. I think they're all basically
But
the
is
same.
standard mediocrity considered standard, I guess is the question.
But I guess my point is that you wouldn't expect any more. Like, if I went and saw a Nicolas Cage movie right now, I would expect him to be terrible in it. I guess that's my point.
Unless you have Joe, which is the outlier.
But I went in with low expectations because it's Nicolas Cage. And then I saw the movie, I thought, okay, he's good in this, but most Cage movies I see, I get that standard Cage feeling.
We just know your general perspective is you're
That's all.
not looking forward to Baldwin performances anyway. Right?
Fair enough.
All right, well, let's take our final movie here, and that is the Oscar A to Z film Auntie Mame from 1958, and it was nominated for 6 awards: editing, cinematography, art direction, supporting actress for Peggy Cass, best actress for Rosalind Russell, and best picture as well. And highly regarded in many circles. It was on AFI's 100 Laughs list and was the #1 box office film of the year. Justin's going to tell us about Auntie Mame.
Well, in this one, Rosalind Russell plays Mame Dennis, a free-spirited socialite who after the death of her brother, is forced to take in her nephew, Patrick, played when he's older by Roger Smith and played when he's younger by Jan Hanslick. Over time, the two begin to get increasingly attached to each other and begin a series of quirky adventures that span across decades, living their lives to the fullest. Mame is an eccentric character that could have easily become this annoying and tedious bore, but fortunately, Russell takes the bull by the horns and doesn't let go. She gives audiences a fun character who grows in ways that make her larger-than-life persona surprisingly honest. I felt like the way she grows to care about Patrick is sincere, very funny, and honestly never got old for me. I really did enjoy it. I admit, I feel like with it being about 2.5 hours, it does get a little too episodic, particularly when we're seeing like, oh, this is Patrick when he's a little boy, this is when he's like a teenager, and this is when he's like 25, give or take a few. But overall, I feel like it comes back to hit its central message home, living life to the fullest, and doing it somewhat theatrically, but such is the character of Auntie Mame. I give it with an A-.
All right, Joe?
Well, I have to say, I think that Auntie Mame is just a very enjoyable, likable character. I think that the writing for this comedy seems very edgy and ahead of its time, very racy in some ways. It's actually, I think even by modern standards, some of the situations are pretty controversial, but I think it's very bold. I think that some of the shots are beautiful, the costumes are great. I just love that opening sequence. and I thought the acting was good. I liked the general story with her character and her growth being somewhat larger than life and a bit removed, but having to go through various things. I do agree, though, that it does go on a little long when she's going on various adventures. It does get a little tedious. I think you could have cut some of that out and not really lost anything, because the core strength is taking place in and around her apartment. And if I think they kept most of it condensed there, it would have been even better. But despite that, I think it's an excellent movie, and I'll leave it with an A.
Yeah, this is a very funny, well-acted movie, but it is painfully obvious that it's taken from a stage play. If the dimming of the lights between every scene wasn't hitting us over the head, the directing does make it clear. But it's easy to see at the same time why this was such a hit, and why it continued, on the stage as a musical then afterwards. It does run on absolutely probably about a half hour too long, but of all the Oscar movies on the A to Z so far that I had not known much about previously, this is definitely one of the biggest surprises. I do like the interactions between the characters. It is incredibly ribald for the time, holds nothing back with the subject matter or its tone of the comedy. I'm going to leave it with an A- as well, like Justin. I really was surprised by this. I had heard of it. I guess I had heard of it as a musical, and I thought that's what we were watching.
Same.
Yeah, I didn't know it was a stage play previously or a non-musical film.
So that was expected.
Yeah. I was very curious to see how a non-musical version of this would have struck me in our generation.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like when I originally saw the Full Monty the first time. I knew it was a musical. Then I saw the movie. It's like, where are the song numbers?
Yes, right.
But this one, I thought the performances really did elevate the material. Russell is fantastic. Did she win for that?
Nobody won.
Nobody won.
Nominated for 6 awards, walked away with nothing.
Wow.
Believe it or not,
That's really surprising, at least for editing. Joe, you're absolutely right. That opening title sequence
and the art direction.
Stuff.
Yeah. I mean the Technicolor is great. The opening sequence is great. All of that. I should before we continue, let me just look up who won. Maybe it was one movie that swept that year.
No, but
it could have been.
In terms of just the technical, I mean, it's a beautiful movie. It looks great.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it really does. No, I can't say that it swept, but Gigi won a lot of the big ones, including the art direction, and it did win Best Picture and Best Director. So it did win a lot of the biggies, Best Adapted Screenplay.
I did hear.
So yeah, unfortunately, that sort of held it back a bit. But yeah, I could have seen her win. And honestly, the kid was a really good actor.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, he's only a kid for maybe the first
hour and a half, maybe.
No, I would say not even, maybe hour. But yeah, I mean, he was a really good little actor, and their chemistry was great. You really believed that, this was Auntie Mame here.
Now, for as good as this movie was, though, there is one thing about it that is kind of bothersome. The racism's pretty bad here.
Yes, it is bad racism, especially with the hired help.
Their Chinese butler is pretty bad.
That is true. That is very true, actually.
Yeah.
For the late 50s, that's pretty racist.
It was fairly racist.
Yeah, it's not like this was in the 1930s here.
Yeah, that's the one aspect of it. Like, I can't really give that a
You're right.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah, you're right on that. And we are almost done the A's, just maybe about a month and a half, 2 months left of those. So some biggies coming up, including Avatar, one of the biggest of all time.
So that'll be a lengthy discussion.
Yes, it will.
For lack of a better word.
A lengthy discussion for a lengthy movie. But all right, that is going to do it for this week's show. Joe, you got the Merlin channel up and running. New things on there, I'm sure.
Yes, actually, I uploaded one of our more recent Sopranos conversations.
Yes, you did.
Still getting some subscribers. I'm thinking about doing another Q&A video. So that's
those are always fun.
Maybe do a live show sometime this weekend. So there'll be some stuff coming up. I'm going to get some character analysis coming up, I think, for Daredevil. I'll be doing one for him. And maybe one for Luke Skywalker coming up in commemoration of Star Wars. So
awesome.
There'll be some good ones coming up.
Very good. And for you guys listening out there, if you have not subscribed yet to our channel, go ahead and do that. We'd love to have you aboard. And we also have the Facebook group, which is Film Fanatics with an exclamation point, and our Twitter feed at Film Fanatics Pod. Also, we will be, of course, doing another listener's choice. So if you have an idea for something you'd like to hear us talk about here on the show, as long as it's more than 2 years old, you can suggest that to us. And we also have the Fast and Furious minisode coming up as well, taking a look at all 7 of the Fast movies. So that's going to do it for the show this week, and we'll see you back here next week. Thanks for listening. Bye!